Long before our modern times, early humans, they were building ideas that pushed the limits of their world. Ideas so advanced and strange that it still baffles scientists to this day. Here are the top 15 most ingenious ancient ideas. Let's start with number 15, the secret that built an empire. Modern concrete. It begins to fail in as little as 50 years, especially in rough environments. Yet Roman aqueducts, harbors, temples, and domes, many constructed over 2,000 years ago, still stand tall. Some have even grown stronger with age. The secret lies in an ancient, seemingly simple innovation, Roman concrete. Long dismissed as primitive by modern standards, this material is now regarded as one of the most durable materials ever invented, and perhaps one of the most genius ideas in the ancient world. At its core, Roman concrete was made from three key ingredients: volcanic ash, lime, which is calcium oxide, and seawater or fresh water, depending on the application. These were mixed with stones or broken bricks to create a paste that was then poured into wooden molds. But unlike modern Portland cement, which is vulnerable to degradation over time, the Roman mix underwent a complex chemical reaction that created an exceptionally durable binder, calcium aluminum silicate hydrate, or CaSH. Now, the real genius came from their use of fine volcanic ash found around the Bay of Naples. When combined with lime and water, this polozzana, as it's known, reacted slowly but thoroughly, forming crystals that locked the concrete together on a microscopic level. And when used in marine structures, something incredible happened. The seawater triggered an ongoing chemical reaction that caused the concrete to effectively self-heal over the centuries. Instead of corroding in salt water, Roman marine concrete absorbed minerals from the ocean, which strengthened the material over time. The iconic Pantheon in Rome, with its unreinforced concrete dome, is the largest of its kind in the world. It owes its longevity to this formulation. At 142 feet in diameter, the Pantheon's dome remains a marvel not only of architecture, but of materials science. Roman engineers tailored this concrete mix to different purposes, and they adjusted the ratio of ash to lime and varied the size and type of aggregate. This all wasn't one recipe, it was like a family of formulations that were fine-tuned by observation and experimentation. Only in recent decades have scientists begun to really understand how Roman concrete worked and how modern versions might be revived to build infrastructure that lasts not decades, but centuries. In a world grappling with crumbling infrastructure, longer-lasting self-healing concrete could reduce carbon emissions, save billions in maintenance, and transform the way we think about construction. And it all began with an ancient recipe, some volcanic ash, and the genius of Roman innovation. Number 14. Ancient Persian refrigerators. Imagine preserving ice not in a modern freezer, but in the middle of a desert thousands of years ago with daytime temperatures that soar above 40 Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit. That sounds impossible, but that's exactly what the ancient Persians accomplished using a remarkable system of passive cooling that involved wind catchers and massive ice domes. Long before electricity or refrigeration, they had devised a sustainable zero-energy system for making and storing ice. A genius idea not just for its time, but even by today's climate-conscious standards. The concept behind these ancient refrigerators was pretty sophisticated. It began with the yakchal, which translates to ice pit. These were large, dome-shaped structures built from a special heat-resistant mortar made of sand, clay, lime, egg whites, ash, and goat hair. The material, called sarouj, was water-resistant and acted as an insulating shield. Some yakchals were over 60 feet tall, and they housed deep subterranean chambers where ice could be stored year-round, even through the blazing summers. But how did they get the ice in the first place? In winter, water from kanats, that's underground aqueducts, was channeled into shallow pools next to the yakchal. These pools were oriented to minimize any sun exposure and take full advantage of the cold desert night. The water would freeze overnight, and laborers would then break the ice and store it inside the dome. Over time, tons of ice could be accumulated, and some yakchals also stored food, fruits, and dairy, taking advantage of the stable, cool microclimate. Some cities in modern-day Iran still contain functioning wind catchers that date back hundreds of years, and some neighborhoods feature entire rows of them, their tall rectangular towers acting like open lungs for the buildings below. Combined with thick adobe walls and underground water systems, they created a passive cooling network that required no electricity, no compressors, and no moving parts. Modern architect and climate scientists have studied these systems extensively. Buildings in the Middle East and beyond are now incorporating updated versions of these wind catchers and evaporative cooling systems. In some experimental homes, modern yakhchals are being tested as low-energy alternatives for food storage in these arid climates. It's a great example of how old knowledge can hold the key to solving new problems. Number 13. Greek fire. Among all the terrifying weapons of the ancient world, few inspired as much fear or as much mystery as Greek fire. Used by the Byzantine Empire as early as the 7th century CE, it was a flammable liquid that could be hurled from ships, sprayed from tubes, or launched in ceramic grenades. What made it terrifying was that it could burn even on the water, continuing to rage as enemy ships tried desperately to extinguish it. The flames would cling to hulls, it crept across the waves and turned naval battles into infernos. Greek fire was a technological marvel way ahead of its time, and its exact chemical composition still remains one of history's most enduring secrets. The invention is attributed to Callinicus of Heliopolis, a Syrian engineer who fled Constantinople during the Arab-Byzantine Wars. He reportedly offered the formula for a new weapon that could decisively tip the balance in warfare. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine IV accepted the offer, and soon Greek fire became a cornerstone of their military strategy, especially in repelling Muslim fleets during sieges of Constantinople in the 7th and 8th centuries. The weapon was deployed using siphon-like devices mounted on the prows of ships. These were basically early versions of flamethrowers. These siphons shot streams of incendiary liquid at enemy vessels where it would ignite on contact. Once lit, it could not be extinguished with water. Instead, it required special mixtures like sand, vinegar, or even urine to douse the flames. What's most remarkable, though, is how tightly the Byzantines guarded the formula. The knowledge of how to make Greek fire was a state secret. This secrecy allowed the Byzantines to use the weapon for centuries, while their enemies struggled to even understand or replicate it. Modern researchers, though, have speculated extensively about the ingredients. Likely components include naphtha, that's a form of petroleum, quicklime, resin, and possibly sulfur or bitumen. Some theorists believe the mixture reacted exothermically with the water, causing it to ignite more violently when doused. Others suggest that it may have been stored in pressurized copper vessels and ignited with a simple fuse or a chemical reaction at the nozzle. Well, today the idea of a weapon that can burn on the water is not as fantastical as it once was. Modern military napalm and white phosphorus share similar properties. But Greek fire was the first, and in many ways the most mysterious. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of technological superiority and national defense. And it reminds us that sometimes the most powerful technologies are not the ones we understand, but the ones that no one else can. Number 12. A war machine powered by human synchronization, the trireme. Long before engines or even gunpowder, one of the most sophisticated war machines on the planet was nothing more than a slender wooden ship powered entirely by oars, wind, and strategy. The trireme, developed by ancient Mediterranean civilizations, especially the Athenians, was a lightning-fast naval vessel that revolutionized warfare at sea. Its design was so refined, so efficient, and so devastating in battle that no other ship matched its combination of speed, maneuverability, and lethality. But the true genius of the trireme wasn't just in the engineering, it was how it turned human effort into mechanical power, coordinating 170 men rowing in unison to turn a wooden hull into a guided missile. Now, at first glance, the trireme was a sleek, unassuming vessel, about 37 meters, 121 feet long, and just 4 meters or 13 feet wide. It was long, narrow, and light. And the name trireme refers to its most distinctive feature, the 3 tiers of oarsmen stacked one above the other. This triple-layered rowing system allows the ship to house 170 rowers, all while keeping the ship low in the water and extremely agile. Each rower had a single oar, and none of them could see where they were going. Coordination was essential and astonishing. A flute player played rhythmic music during maneuvers and guided the tempo of every stroke. The rowers, mostly trained citizens, not slaves, practiced for months to learn complex turns, bursts of speed, and tight formation rowing. A fully trained Athenian trireme crew could achieve speeds of 9 knots, about 10 miles an hour, which in the ancient world was astonishing. Mounted at the bow was a bronze-tipped ram, an embolan, designed to puncture enemy hulls just below the waterline. Skilled captains would feint, dodge, and then suddenly accelerate into a flanking maneuver, smashing through the side of an enemy ship before veering away. At its peak, the Athenian navy deployed hundreds of triremes, the backbone of its military power and the reason Athens dominated the Aegean Sea. The fleet wasn't just a war tool, it was a political instrument, a trade enabler, and a cultural symbol. Naval supremacy allowed Athens to grow rich, support democracy, and spread its influence. Eventually, larger ships like the quadrireme and quinquereme appeared, and naval warfare moved towards heavier, slower platforms. But none matched the agility and precision of the trireme. By the time of the Roman Empire, it had faded from dominance, but its legacy as one of the greatest marine inventions in history remains. The trireme was the ancient world's fighter jet. It was fast, efficient, team-based, and devastating in capable hands. And all of it, from its triple oars to its bronzed ram, was made without a single machine. Just geometry, physics, wood, and the power of human rhythm. Number 11. A highway network without the wheel, the Inca road system. The Inca Empire stretched across some of the most punishing terrain on the planet, from the snow-covered Andes to the arid deserts of coastal Peru. And yet long before the age of cars or trains, the Inca built one of the most sophisticated and extensive road systems in the ancient world. Over 40,000 kilometers, that's 25,000 miles of highways, bridges, stone staircases, and mountain tunnels. The most astonishing part? They did it without wheels, without pack animals except llamas, and without iron tools. Known as the Kapaknan, the Royal Road, this ancient highway system was the backbone of the Inca Empire. It connected the capital, Cusco, with the further reaches of the empire, stretching into present-day Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, and Ecuador. These weren't simple dirt paths either. Many roads were paved with stone, graded with retaining walls, or cut directly into cliffs. Some climbed to elevations above 5,000 meters or 16,000 feet, and others crossed canyons using rope suspension bridges woven from grass, which had to be rebuilt annually, but they were strong enough to carry marching soldiers. At critical intervals along the network were tambos. These were rest stations and supply depots, spaced roughly every 20 kilometers. They functioned like ancient motels where travelers, soldiers, or government workers could rest, resupply, and relay information. Most remarkable of all, though, were the chasquis, elite messengers who ran the roads in relays, delivering messages via not record systems or by word of mouth. These runners could cover up to 240 kilometers or 150 miles per day, passing urgent information across huge distances in record time. So, how did the Incas manage such a feat without the wheel or iron? Well, their road system was built for human and llama traffic, not carts. The absence of the wheel wasn't a limitation, it was just simply an adaptation. Wheels are useless on steep, rocky inclines or narrow trails that are carved into cliffs. Instead, Inca engineers focused on vertical mobility. They built massive stone staircases, terraces, and zigzagging paths that allowed people and pack animals to ascend thousands of feet safely and efficiently. The Kapaknan was not just about transport either. It was a political and economic tool. It allowed the central government in Cusco to control its vast empire, redistribute food and goods, collect taxes, and project military power. Today, large portions of the road network are being studied, mapped, and protected. In 2014, UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site. Researchers and archaeologists are still discovering new branches buried under the jungle or hidden in high valleys. The more they find, the clearer it becomes. This just wasn't a network of roads, it was a superhighway system built by a civilization that never saw the need for the wheel. The genius idea of the road system wasn't just in the size or the engineering, it was the adaptability of it, the understanding of the environment, altitude, and the limits of human and animal transport. It didn't impose a foreign system on the land. It worked with it, creating a logistical marvel from the mountains themselves. Number 10. The earthquake detector, 1600 years ahead of its time, the Chinese seismograph of 132 CE. In an age when most of the world had no reliable way to even detect earthquakes until the ground had already split wide open, the Chinese inventor Zhang Hang developed something so advanced, so conceptually modern, that it wouldn't be replicated for more than a millennium. In the year 132 CE, he unveiled the world's first known seismograph, a bronze device that could detect earthquakes hundreds of kilometers away and indicate their direction. This wasn't guesswork or folklore either, it was a real mechanical instrument, a dragon-headed urn so precise in its design that it stunned scholars when it was first described in ancient texts. It consisted of a large bronze vessel roughly 2 meters in diameter. Around its circumference were 8 dragon heads, each representing a cardinal or intercardinal direction. Directly below each dragon's mouth sat a bronze toad with its mouth open. Inside the vessel, a pendulum-like mechanism was suspended at the center. When an earthquake happened, even hundreds of kilometers away, the seismic wave would travel through the earth and the internal mass would shift, triggering one of the dragon heads to open and drop a bronze ball into the toad's mouth below. The direction of the first drop ball indicate the source of the direction of the quake. The genius of this device lay in the mechanical simplicity of it. The inventor didn't have accelerometers, GPS, or electronic sensors. He had geometry, intuition, and metallurgy. The mechanism used inertial mass to respond to low-frequency ground motion, which translated that motion into directional data. Although the technology didn't spread or evolve into any modern seismic science in ancient times, its existence showed that ancient Chinese thinkers were already conceptualizing the Earth as a dynamic moving system. Today, Zhang Hang's seismograph is recognized as one of the most astonishing instruments of antiquity. It was not just a novelty, it was a genuine step towards understanding and reacting to natural disasters, built by a man who lived in an era when most of the world thought earthquakes were messages from angry gods. Number 9. The Archimedes Screw. Few ancient minds shine as brightly in the history of engineering as that of Archimedes of Syracuse, a Greek mathematician, physicist, and inventor who lived in the 3rd century BCE. His contributions to mechanics, geometry, and fluid dynamics were centuries ahead of their time. But among his many brilliant inventions, one device stands out for its enduring simplicity and utility: the Archimedes screw, a water lifting machine that continues to be used in agriculture, irrigation, and wastewater treatment. The Archimedes screw is elegant in its design. It consists of a spiral or helix encased within a hollow pipe. When this device is tilted at an angle and rotated, it scoops up water from a lower elevation and carries it upward along the spiral until it flows out at the top. It is one of the earliest known positive displacement pumps, and it works using only rotational motion. No pistons, no valves, no suction. This technology is so robust and mechanically sound that versions of the Archimedes screw are still manufactured and installed today, over 2,000 years later. But the screw's genius lies in more than just the practicality of it. It's in the physics. As the screw rotates, pockets of water become trapped between the blades and the inner wall of the casing. These water pockets are isolated from each other and they're pushed upwards through the helical tube because the device is sealed and the water doesn't fall back down. Gravity works with the motion to keep the water moving uphill. And the best part? It doesn't require much force. One person could operate an Archimedes screw manually using a crank or a pedal mechanism. In the ancient world, it was also adapted to be powered by animals or even water wheels. The Archimedes screw has also found applications in reverse. In some hydroelectric projects, it's used backwards to generate electricity by allowing water to flow downward and rotate the screw like a turbine. And yet, when you strip this thing down, the entire idea comes from one guy thinking about spirals, volume, and water. It's a recurring motif in Archimedes' work, and it appears in his studies of pi, volume displacement, and even infinitesimals. His screw was not just a tool, it was the embodiment of his deep understanding of geometry and motion. Today, the Archimedes screw is a monument to ancient ingenuity. It's not flashy or dramatic, it doesn't burn on water or defy gravity, but it solved a universal problem with a shape so perfect that 2,000 years of technological advancement haven't rendered it obsolete. That is genius. Quiet, spiraling, and eternal genius. Number 8. The Baghdad Battery. In the late 1930s, while excavating a 2,000-year-old Parthian village near modern-day Baghdad, archaeologists uncovered a set of small clay jars that, at first, seemed entirely unremarkable. Each contained a copper cylinder and an iron rod, sealed with asphalt. But as researchers studied them more closely, a radical theory emerged. These vessels might have been primitive galvanic cells. In short, ancient batteries. Each battery consisted of a terracotta jar about 13 to 14 centimeters tall, and inside was a rolled copper sheet sealed at the bottom and suspended around an iron rod, all held in place with a plug of asphalt. The copper tube and iron rod were not physically connected, which is key. In a basic galvanic cell, two different metals serve as electrodes, and a mild acidic solution like vinegar or lemon juice completes the circuit by facilitating ion exchange between them. The result? A low-voltage current between half a volt and 1 volt per cell that's enough to cause electroplating in a controlled environment. This led to the provocative theory that the Parthians or early Persians may have used electricity for electroplating gold or silver onto objects, at a time when gilding was expensive and technically difficult. Skeptics, however, point out that there's no clear written record of any electrochemical knowledge from this period. No wires, connectors, or even confirmed plating workshops have been found alongside the jars. Others argue that the vessels may have had a ritual or medicinal use, or that their resemblance to batteries is purely coincidental. After all, vinegar and iron were used in many ancient remedies. Some fringe theories, though, have stretched the battery hypothesis into claims of lost technology or ancient electricity grids. Claims unsupported by any serious evidence. But the more grounded interpretations still raise some compelling questions. How far did this ancient experimental science go? Could electricity have been discovered, forgotten, and reinvented centuries later? Whether or not they were truly used as batteries, their very existence forces us to reconsider the boundaries of experimentation in the ancient world and what might have been achieved with the materials and curiosity of the time. It's one of the few cases in ancient history where a handful of clay jars could rewrite what we thought we knew about the timeline of invention. Moving on to number 7, the Roman aqueducts, gravity-driven water networks that still are working. The Roman Empire was many things: a military juggernaut, an architectural pioneer, a political experiment. But perhaps its most transformative innovation, and one of the most brilliant engineering feats of the ancient world, was the aqueduct system it created. At its height, Rome's aqueducts delivered over 300 million gallons of water per day to cities, baths, fountains, latrines, and homes, using nothing but gravity and precision. From the 4th century BCE onward, Roman engineers mastered the art of moving water across huge distances without pumps or even pressurized pipes. The key was in the gradient, a consistent, gentle slope that allowed water to flow smoothly downhill over hundreds of kilometers. The gradient had to be exact. Too steep and the flow would erode the channel, too flat and the water would stagnate. To achieve this, Romans employed tools like the corybates, a 6-meter-long surveying level with plumb lines that were used to ensure minute elevation changes, and the groma, used to align the roads and aqueduct paths. Surveyors mapped out routes through hills, valleys, and mountains with incredible foresight, often opting for indirect but stable paths to maintain their all-important slope. What's truly mind-blowing, though, is how durable these things were. Many are still partially or fully intact today. The Aqua Virgo, completed in 19 BCE by Marcus Agrippa, still supplies water to Rome's famous Trevi Fountain over 2,000 years later. Roman aqueducts also allowed powered industrial innovations. Water mills in Gaul and Syria used aqueduct-fed basins to drive grain mills and textile machinery. In cities like Constantinople, aqueducts enabled lush public gardens, ornamental pools, and urban layout. And it wasn't just for the elite. While palaces and villas had private water access, even modest homes received public fountain water, and toilets were often available in communal latrines. This democratization of water was unmatched until even modern times. Today, engineers and historians still study Roman aqueducts as models of low-energy water transport. In an era that's still grappling with water scarcity and aging infrastructure, the Roman system, powered solely by gravity, offers a sustainable blueprint. Modern gravity-fed water systems are now gaining attention for their efficiency, and they owe much to Roman precedent. In a world that often forgets that greatness can be built with stone, water, and patience, the Roman aqueducts remind us that the brilliance flows, quite literally, from understanding the lay of the land. Number 6. The Library of Alexandria, the blueprint for all knowledge systems. In the 3rd century BCE, in a Mediterranean port city that was bustling with trade and sailors, one of the greatest intellectual endeavors in human history was underway. The Library of Alexandria, conceived by the Ptolemies in Egypt, it wasn't just a building to store scrolls, it was the first attempt to systematically gather, organize, and preserve all the world's knowledge in one place. In an era without printing presses, file systems, or searchable indexes, the ambition was staggering, and yet for a time it worked. The genius of the Library of Alexandria wasn't just in the number of texts it amassed, although estimates range from 400 to 700,000 scrolls, but in how it functioned as a knowledge engine. It wasn't just a place for storing books. It was attached to the Temple of Muses, which was operated as a kind of ancient think tank. Scholars from Greece, India, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and even beyond were brought here to Alexandria to live, study, and write in residence, supported by state stipends. This was perhaps the first real instance of state-sponsored research and development. The Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt had a mission: accumulate the sum total of human understanding, regardless of its origin, and any ship that docked in Alexandria was reportedly searched for manuscripts. If a scroll was found, it was copied. The original went to the library, the copy was returned. Embassies were sent abroad just to collect texts. Scribes worked continuously, translating works into Greek from Persian, Sanskrit, and Egyptian. Some of the greatest minds of antiquity passed through its halls. Euclid may have taught mathematics here. Archimedes corresponded with Alexandrian scholars. Eratosthenes, the head librarian, famously calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy using little more than a stick, shadows, and trigonometry. But what makes the Library of Alexandria one of the most genius ancient ideas is that it redefined knowledge as a universal public resource, not something sacred and kept by priests or kings. It was a democratizing force, or at least the closest thing to one in a world still ruled by empires. But the story of the library is also one of a profound tragedy. Over the centuries, it suffered multiple disasters. Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria in 48 BCE may have caused an initial fire. Later Christian and Muslim rulers regarded parts of its collection as pagan or heretical. Earthquakes, neglect, and wars all took their toll. By the time of the Arab conquest in the 7th century CE, the library, as a functioning institution, had ceased to exist. The loss of this library is often romanticized, but the deeper loss was the model it represented: a unified global archive, open inquiry, and systematic cataloging. All ideas that had to be reinvented centuries later during the Renaissance and Enlightenment. Today, the very concept of a universal knowledge system, whether Wikipedia or the Internet Archive, owes its philosophical origin to Alexandria. So does the modern research university. Even the principle of peer review and institutional learning traces its roots back to what the library attempted. It wasn't just a building full of scrolls. It was the first time humanity tried to map the mind of our species and then share that map across time and culture. Number 5. The Nazca Lines, giant geoglyphs that were drawn without flight or machines. Across the desert plains in southern Peru is one of the most mysterious artistic feats of the ancient world, the Nazca Lines. These are massive geoglyphs etched into the desert floor. They depict animals, plants, and geometric shapes. Some figures are over 300 meters in length, and the straightest lines run arrows straight for more than 15 kilometers. They were created by the Nazca people between 500 BCE and 500 CE, and the lines are best appreciated, and in many cases only fully visible, from the air. That was a vantage point unavailable to the creators. How did the Nazca accomplish this, and why, remains one of the greatest archaeological puzzles of the Americas. The lines were made by removing the top layer of oxidized reddish-brown desert rock, which exposed the lighter color beneath. In the hyper-arid conditions of the Nazca, where there's almost no wind or rain, those markings have remained intact for over 1,500 years. So how did the ancient people with no writing system, no metal tools, and no aerial perspective create something this huge and accurate? Well, the answer may lie in the genius of their surveying techniques. Archaeologists believe the Nazca used basic tools like ropes, wooden stakes, and sight lines to map out their designs. A figure like a hummingbird, for instance, could be plotted by creating a scaled-down version and then transferring the proportions to the desert floor using a grid system, a technique that's known to have been used by other ancient cultures. But as for why they were created, well, theories range from the ceremonial to the astronomical. Some archaeologists believe the lines served as ritual pathways used during religious ceremonies. Others suggest they were astronomical calendars, aligning with solstices or star paths. The work of Maria Rieke, a German mathematician who devoted her life to studying these lines, proposed that some of the figures align with constellations, while others point to seasonal water sources that would have been a critical concern in one of the driest places on the planet. But the real wonder of the lines doesn't require extraterrestrials. It lies in the coordination, mathematics, and the ambition of the Nazca culture. People who lived in a harsh environment chose to carve gigantic images into the earth that they themselves might never see in full. That kind of faith in that level of planning with minimal tools is a mark of genius that resonates across the centuries. Today, the Nazca lines are a protected UNESCO World Heritage Site. Their survival is an example of ancient innovation and a reminder how humans have always looked upward and outward and tried to mark the earth with something eternal. Number 4. The Tunnel of Eupalinos, a secret waterway dug from both ends, and they met in the middle. Over 2,500 years ago, on the Greek island of Samos, engineers completed one of the most astonishing projects of the ancient world. A tunnel cut through a mountain, by hand, from both ends simultaneously, with no modern surveying tools. And the two ends met almost perfectly in the middle. This is known as the Tunnel of Eupalinos. This 1-kilometer-long subterranean passage was not a military escape route or a ceremonial project. It was a water pipeline, a lifeline for the ancient city of Samos. The tunnel was commissioned by Polycrates, the tyrant of Samos, in the 6th century BCE to ensure a secure water supply that couldn't be cut off by enemies. The engineer behind the project was Eupalinos of Megara, and his solution was as bold as it was brilliant. Instead of digging a channel from one end, he would start at both sides of Mount Castro and have his teams meet beneath the mountain. Now, this might sound simple today, but it was almost impossible to execute without modern surveying equipment, GPS, or even basic compasses as we know them. But Eupalinos understood geometry and topography on a practical level that surpassed anything seen before. To align the tunnels, Eupalinos first surveyed the mountain's flanks to ensure both entry points were at the same elevation. He then deliberately introduced a slight zigzag in one of the passages, not because he was off course, but as a fail-safe. By turning the tunnel slightly, the workers were guaranteed to intersect rather than risk passing each other. That simple geometric insight likely saved the entire project. Inside the tunnel, it's just over 1.8 meters high and half a meter wide, with a deeper channel cut into the floor for water to flow. It was so well constructed that modern archaeologists, upon rediscovering it in the 19th and 20th centuries, initially doubted that it could be ancient. Yet inscriptions, architectural style, and historical texts, including Herodotus's account, confirmed its authenticity. It is one of the earliest known examples of applied engineering geometry, and it still stands today as proof that long before the Renaissance or the Industrial Age, there were minds capable of solving problems on a level that feels impossibly modern. Number 3. The Lycurgus Cup, nanotechnology in a 4th century Roman goblet. So at first glance, the Lycurgus cup, it kind of looks like a typical Roman artifact, an ornately crafted glass chalice decorated with scenes from Greek mythology. But expose it to light and something supernatural happens. The glass changes color. In reflected light, it glows green. In transmitted light, it turns a vivid red. Now this just isn't artistic flair, this is the result of nanoparticles of gold and silver embedded in the glass, making the Lycurgus cup one of the earliest known uses of nanotechnology in human history. Created in the 4th century CE, the cup depicts the mythological story of King Lycurgus of Thrace, who attempted to kill Dionysus and was punished by being entangled in grapevines. But while artistic merit is undeniable, the optical behavior of the glass has baffled and fascinated scientists for decades. In the 1950s, researchers first noticed this strange color-changing effect, but it wasn't until the 1990s with the rise of electron microscopy and spectrometry that the true secret was uncovered. The glass contains colloidal nanoparticles of gold and silver, finely ground and suspended in the material. These particles are about 50 to 100 nanometers wide. Now what's remarkable is that this wasn't a one-off accident. Other Roman glassware has been found with similar metallic nanoparticle inclusions, suggesting that artisans may have intentionally mixed these tiny amounts of precious metals into molten glass to achieve certain effects, even if they didn't understand the science behind it. Experiments have shown that with proper tuning, similar glass can detect even minute changes in fluid composition, suggesting that the same basic effect could be adapted to create biosensors for glucose, toxins, or even disease markers. Imagine that a 1600-year-old wine cup turning into a prototype for medical sensors. It's more than just a beautiful artifact. It is a mystery, one foot in ancient myth and the other in modern science. And it proves, once again, that genius doesn't require understanding. Sometimes it just requires experimentation, observation, and a craftsman's instinct sharpened by generations of tradition. Number 2. How wet sand likely helped build the pyramids, the sailing stones of ancient Egypt. The pyramids of Egypt have stood for over 4,500 years. They're symbols of a civilization whose mastery of engineering remains unmatched for its time. The Great Pyramid of Giza alone, constructed with over 2.3 million limestone and granite blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons, has long defied explanation. Over the centuries, countless theories have been proposed, and some suggest long ramps made of mud brick and limestone chippings extended as the pyramid rose. Others favor spiral ramps wrapping around the outside. A few propose that the stones were pulled on wooden sleds over lubricated paths or across laid-down logs. More fringe theories invoke lost technologies, forgotten secrets, and even extraterrestrial assistance. But a subtle clue, overlooked for decades, might hold the most plausible and elegantly simple answer. In the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, a Middle Kingdom monarch from the 12th dynasty, there's a painting that shows laborers dragging a colossal statue on a wooden sledge. In front of the sledge, a man is seen pouring water onto the sand. For a long time, Egyptologists interpreted this as a ceremonial act, a purification ritual, or a symbolic gesture. But in 2014, a team of physicists from the University of Amsterdam saw something very different. They proposed that this act wasn't religious, it was practical. What they discovered through experimentation was that slightly wetting the sand significantly reduces friction, not just a little, but by a lot. When the sand is dry, it piles up on the front of the sledge, creating resistance that makes dragging extremely difficult. When it's too wet, the sand becomes boggy and it clumps together. But at the right moisture level, water creates capillary bridges between the grains of sand, locking them together into a firmer, more stable surface. The result is a slick, compact tract that resists piling and allows sledges to glide smoothly, what physicists call stiffening the granular medium. Laboratory experiments confirmed the effect. With the right amount of moisture, pulling force could be reduced by half. For a team of laborers dragging a multi-ton statue or stone block, that difference was massive. It meant the difference between success and failure. The wet sand hypothesis also fits perfectly with other known practices of Egyptian engineering. They mastered water control. After all, they built canals, irrigation systems, and even harbor basins. Managing water levels wasn't a mystical, it was foundational. Using it to reduce drag in sand would have been entirely within their skill set. Some critics have argued that while the technique explains transport over flat terrain, it doesn't solve all the problems, such as lifting the stones up the side of a rising pyramid. Well, that's true. Ramps, levers, and other systems would still be needed for vertical placement. But moving millions of multi-ton blocks from quarry to site was the first and most daunting challenge, and the wet sand solution is now widely regarded as one of the most likely explanations for how they did it effectively. All that to say, it's a reminder that sometimes innovation isn't about new tools. It's about seeing the existing world more clearly. The Egyptians saw the desert as not an obstacle, but as something that could be shaped, coaxed, and managed. And with nothing but ropes, men, and water, they made the earth move. Number 1. The Sardinian nuraghi, tower fortresses from the edge of history. In the hills of Sardinia, Italy's second-largest island, rise thousands of ancient stone towers unlike anything else on Earth. Known as nuraghi, these Bronze Age megastructures were built over 3,500 years ago by a prehistoric people, and with no written language, no metal tools for quarrying, and no formal blueprint system. Yet they constructed stone towers up to 65 feet tall without mortar, using irregular blocks of basalt and granite, some weighing several tons, stacked with such a precision that many structures still stand today. There are over 7,000 nuraghi documented across Sardinia. Some archaeologists believe there were once as many as 10,000. But what makes them one of the most genius ancient ideas ever is that they were entirely unique. Nowhere else in the world did a prehistoric culture build such a dense network of multi-story stone towers. They represent an indigenous technological innovation so advanced, yet so isolated, that it rewrites what we thought was possible in the Bronze Age Mediterranean. The construction of a typical one is as impressive as it is mysterious. First, massive basalt blocks were quarried, sometimes from miles away, using only stone hammers, wooden levers, and primitive wedges. These blocks were then transported by dragging, rolling on logs, or sliding over prepared tracks, and then they were stacked together without mortar or cement. The towers themselves were built using a method called corbelling, where successive layers of stone are cantilevered inward to create a false dome. Now, this technique is seen in other megalithic sites like the Tholos tombs of Mycenae or beehive huts of Ireland, but nowhere on the scale or concentration of Sardinia. So why were they built? Well, no one knows for sure. Some scholars believe they were fortresses, part of a militarized society where clans or chiefdoms controlled territory through physical presence. Others argue that there were ritual or symbolic centers. Their circular paths and astronomical orientations suggest they may honor solstices or lunar events. Still others suggest they served as multifunctional hubs, military, administrative, domestic, and spiritual all at once. But the density and scale of them suggest a highly organized society, likely made up of clans or chiefdoms, each controlling their own territory. Today, they are undergoing a renaissance of study. Archaeologists are mapping their distribution with drones and LiDAR, and analyzing their orientation with astronomical software, and excavating their interiors with care. In modern engineering terms, they are load distribution miracles. Their base-heavy construction, wide foundations, and dry stone interlocking give them a resilience that modern builders still study. Some nuraghi have been standing intact for 35 centuries through storms, erosion, and war. They're not ruins, they're survivors. Together, these towers and statues form a visual language that has no parallel. They belong not to Greece, Rome, or Egypt, but to a singular island-bound civilization that dared to build vertically, boldly, and permanently. Thanks for watching, everybody.